Welcome back to HQ Spotlight. The quarterback situation in Colorado is a quirky one. So Deion Sanders thought he brought in their next heir in Julian Lewis, but the freshman hasn't quite worked out. So then Sanders also turned to his transfer quarterback, Kaidon Salter, but he was also benched recently in favor of the third string, Ryan Staub, who after the win told the reporter after the win against Delaware that he had a dream the night before that he was going to have a big moment in the game, and then he comes in and look at the numbers that you see there between the three quarterbacks that were used against Delaware. So obviously there's some question marks going into this next game against Houston. Who is going to get the start? And reporters asked Deion Sanders, and here's what he had to say.
There was a report by Pete Thamel that Ryan Staub is the expected starter against Houston. Are you able to confirm that?
I'm not confirming nothing to y'all. Y'all know that. We ain't like that. We good. We have capable guys. Staub has been doing a phenomenal job doing and getting the majority of the reps, but I haven't made that assessment or decision yet.
In case you guys were wondering, that's also sweet tea in the cup next to him. He made a point to tell everyone that he was drinking sweet tea ahead of this matchup. I wanted to see if our guys are drinking the Colorado Kool-Aid as we bring in Tom Fornelli and Shehan Jeyarajah. Guys, we know Colorado is good for a lot of things, but the quarterback situation, Tom, feels a little funky going into this one. What do you make of Deion's comments, and who do you think ultimately will get the start?
I mean, I think the answer was in what he said, where he said that Staub is getting the most reps with the first team in practice. That typically goes to the guy who's going to be starting the game that week. So I'm going to trust the reports. I'm going to trust the practice snaps and think that it will be Staub starting the game. Now, whether or not that's the right decision, I don't know. It's certainly a surprise decision because this is a Colorado team that, having to replace Shedeur Sanders, goes into the transfer portal, brings in Kaidon Salter, who had been at Liberty the last few years, has the incoming freshman stud in Juju Lewis, and Staub is not the guy that you ever thought would be the guy getting the starting gig all throughout the offseason. He was always number 3 on the depth chart, so to be possibly considering him as a starter in your third game of the season is very much a surprise. But it's also kind of interesting in that if you think about it, like, Deion has been a coach for a long time. He's never been a coach where his son wasn't the quarterback. There was never a question as to who the quarterback was going to be on one of his teams in any single game unless there was an injury. So this is the first time Deion, as the head coach of a program, is going through a quarterback battle, and maybe he's going to be he's taking a kind of hot hand approach, and he thinks right now Ryan Staub's got the hot hand. Yeah,
it is certainly interesting, that dynamic, because it's not just Deion the dad, or I guess this year it is just Deion the coach, no Deion the dad there. Shehan, when we think about the other quarterbacks, particularly Julian Lewis, I mean, I remember when the video dropped when it was Shedeur and he's passing the Lamborghini keys to him. He had the chain. Like, this was the next big thing in Colorado. So now that we're hearing Ryan Staub is going to be the starter, how does that impact him and the rest of that quarterback room?
Yeah, if I'm Ryan Staub, I'm asking for the keys right away. I'd love to drive that Lamborghini. But I think that for Julian Lewis, it doesn't necessarily change that much. I mean, the reality of the situation is they brought in a veteran quarterback at first so that he could have time to learn. And I'll tell you what, in his first 2 games, he's looked like a freshman. He has not looked ready to this point. And so Ryan Staub jumping ahead of him, obviously, I'm sure for him is quite disappointing, but it doesn't necessarily change the timeline for him. I think if you're Kaidon Salter, this is much bigger of an issue. He's a senior quarterback, obviously a 2-year starter at Liberty, led them to the 2023 Fiesta Bowl. And for him to get beaten out by somebody who frankly was an afterthought in this competition and on this roster, I think is a really rough look for him. It's going to be tough for him to get back into that conversation. Now, look, Ryan Staub could go out there and with a week of practice not look good, but I think that the question has always been, when is it Julian Lewis's time? That time has not come as yet. For Kaidon Salter, the worries at that time may be over.
Yeah, it is difficult because even with Kaidon Salter, there was a lot of expectation for him coming in, and the numbers aren't bad there. 13 of 16, 102, the 25 rushing yards as well. But we are operating under the assumption that it is Ryan Staub going to get the start this week against Houston. So Shehan, that being said, Staub is your impact player in this one. I'm curious, though, you kind of touched on it. How long is the leash for Staub here if we're going to continue to have this open conversation about what time and when, who is stepping in? What do you expect here for Staub?
Yeah, I mean, Staub is such an interesting story because for people who don't know, he was committed to Colorado's previous staff under Carl Durrell. And even when Deion Sanders came in and said, I'm bringing my own guys, Staub decided to stick around. And with Deion Sanders, he's been such an NFL type coach in the way that he acquires personnel. When he sees a deficiency, he wants to bring in a new player. Well, Staub is actually an example of guys growing within the program. He's been there 3 years and he stepped up, and you saw him enter the game last week against Delaware. And the biggest thing that he gave you versus some of those others is he really pushed the ball down the field. You mentioned, of course, 16 pass attempts, 102 yards for Caden Salter. Well, when Staub came into the game, he only had 10 pass attempts and 150 yards, 15 yards per pass attempt with 2 touchdowns. That's what this team needs, frankly. This is not a team that runs the ball at a consistent level at this point, and he knows after being in this program for multiple years, you got to be able to make things happen with your legs, either to throw or to run. So I think that this is a big opportunity for him to come out, and I expect him to take full advantage of it with his downfield passing.
You know, I'm not a football coach. I'm just a humble talking head. But if I were a football coach and I seemingly had very little confidence in my quarterback situation right now, so much so that I can't decide who my starter is, and I'm going on the road to play a conference game, you know what I'm doing? I'm leaning on my run game, and that's why my player to watch in this one, my impact player, is Colorado running back Micah Welch, who so far this season only has 78 yards on 18 carries, and frankly, I don't think 18 carries is enough through 2 games. He's a big body. He is not going to be the guy that's going to be breaking free 75-yard runs, but I think to keep the offense on schedule, to take some of that pressure off of my quarterback, to keep us being able to move the chains and keep moving down the field to try to get points on the board, I want to lean on him. I want to lean on my run game as a whole, so I think that Welch is somebody who could have a much bigger role this week than we have seen him at any point so far this season.
Good stuff for the Houston Cougars to pay attention to going into this matchup. And I want to take you guys to the other side of this one, looking to make it 3 straight wins to start the season. Tom, when you think about how the Cougars have been playing, how important has it been to their game plan to get off to an early start in some of these games?
I mean, I think that for anybody, you want to get off to a fast start to game because then it lets you dictate the pace and the style of play. But as we could see on the graphic here, the first half has not been kind to this Houston Cougars offense. Last week, particularly against Rice, only leading 7-3 before blowing up for 28 points in the second half. So when you are playing at home against a conference opponent, you do want to get off to a quick start. So that way you can rely on your defense, which through 2 games, granted, Houston has not played the most stalwart of opponents to this point. But statistically and performance-wise, their defense has been very good. In fact, I would say it's the part of the team that has been the best part of the team. So I would like to be able to put my defense in a spot where we get an early lead, which will allow me to lean into my strengths on that side, whether that's getting after the quarterback who might not have the most confidence in the world, who might be looking over his shoulder, hoping he doesn't get yanked, and putting him in bad spots, trying to force him to make a mistake, or just kind of loading up to stop the run to force that quarterback to beat me because maybe you don't believe that he can. So I think that if I'm the Cougs, I definitely want to get off to a better start than I have, but I also don't think it's an absolute necessity either. Houston,
of course, only has allowed 9 points through their first 2 games. I mentioned the 3-game win streak, but something interesting here in our notes that we're looking at, they have a 3-game losing streak against conference opponents. So obviously this being a conference game, you want to set the tone early here. So Shehan, give us some players or a player you're looking at that can help the Houston Cougars prevent that from happening.
Well, I think that the most underrated player coming into this game is tight end Tanner Koziel. He was a huge addition coming over from Ball State as a tight end, 2-time All-MAC selection last year, including, by the way, second team last year, only behind the leading receiver in the country. But he's come over and been a huge presence for this Houston offense. 6'7", 240 pounds. He's the kind of game-breaking talent in the seam that Houston hasn't had in a little while, and especially with a young quarterback in Connor Wigman, who's still trying to figure himself out after transferring from Texas A&M. Koziel has been a big-time target for him, already over 100 yards as a tight end through their first 2 games. I think he's going to need to be an even bigger piece, especially going against a Colorado linebacking core that's really good at stopping the run, but not quite as good against the pass.
I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball here. I'm going to point out Houston defensive lineman Eddie Walls, who so far through 2 games has 9 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack. He has been a very disruptive player for this defense. And as we've been talking about throughout the entire segment, Colorado's got a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback situation. I want to make them far more uncertain. I want to put pressure on whoever's back there taking the snaps, and I think Walls is a guy who can do it.
Let's get to your game predictions, fellas. Tom, coming right back to you. Who wins this one and what's the play?
It's not overly confident, but I do like Houston -4.5 just because I feel like at this point in the season they have a better idea of what their identity is and who they are than Colorado does. So at home with a short number, I'll lay it with the Cougs.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Colorado to win outright. I think it's going to be a really tough back-and-forth game, but this is a tone-setting type game for Colorado where they go on the road with a first-time starting quarterback. I think they're able to get it done, and it's going to be a lower-scoring game, but I think that they ultimately come away victorious.
All right, fellas, we will enjoy the time, and I can't wait to hear who's going to play quarterback for the Colorado Buffaloes this week. We appreciate it. Our fellas keeping us up to date with the latest when it comes to college football. Of course, Colorado and Houston just one of a handful of games kicking off on the Friday Night Lights.